The film begins with a voiceover prologue from Barnabas Collins. When Barnabas was 10 years old, in the year 1752, the Collins family left Liverpool, England, to settle in the New World, where they established the seashore town of Collinsport in Maine and their foundation manor of Collinwood. In 1776, the adult Barnabas, then a charming aristocrat, denies the affections of his French maid, Angelique Bouchard. When his parents meet a mysterious death, he learns that Angelique is a witch. However, before he can act, she hypnotizes his lover, Josette Dupré, into committing suicide by jumping off Widow's Hill, a lofty, jagged cliff. Driven beyond endurance, he jumps off the cliff as well, but Angelique curses him to be a vampire, ensuring his suffering is endless. She then reveals his monstrous nature to the residents of Collinwood, who turn on him and lock him in a box, which is buried in a lonely forest. In 1972, a governess named Victoria Winters arrives at Collinwood by train from New York City. She has been hired by Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, the current family matriarch, to oversee her young nephew, David. The boy lost his mother and, apparently, his mind, as he appears to talk to her. Victoria also meets other members of the family: David's shifty father, Roger; Elizabeth's mean-tempered teenage daughter, Carolyn; David's alcoholic psychiatrist, Dr. Julia Hoffman; and the servants, Mrs. Johnson, the housekeeper, and Willie Loomis, the gamekeeper. That night, as she settles in, she spots a familiar specter who cryptically informs her of an impending arrival. Meanwhile, a group of construction workers dig up Barnabas's box, and he bursts out, feeding on all of them. He stumbles through 1972 Collinsport, faced with the strange new world around him, but eventually makes his way back to Collinwood. He proves his identity to Elizabeth by revealing a secret vault in the manor filled with treasure. He explains to her that all he wants is to reclaim his home and family. Elizabeth agrees to let him stay, on the condition that he keeps his true nature and the treasure a secret. The next day, Barnabas begins integrating himself with his descendants, passing himself off as a distant relative from England who has arrived to restore the Collins family's fortunes. He discovers that the Collins fishing business has been brought to ruin by a new competitor, Angel Bay, whose owner soon comes to welcome him, Angelique. She explains that while he was gone, she became a major figure in Collinsport and now effectively runs the entire town, having brought the Collins family to ruin with her influence. She manages to wound Barnabas with daylight, but later, Elizabeth encourages him to defy Angelique for the sake of the family. Barnabas figures out how to re-establish the family business, largely by hypnotizing most of Angelique's fishermen and persuading them to work for him instead. At the same time, he gains the trust of the Collins family. He also begins a romance with Victoria, who uncannily resembles his lost love, Josette. Dr. Hoffman discovers Barnabas's secret, but is persuaded by Elizabeth to keep it confidential for scientific purposes. She begins working on making Barnabas human by bonding his blood with human blood. Meanwhile, Angelique, still obsessed with Barnabas, meets with him and once again attempts to seduce him. When he rejects her a second time, she vows to destroy him if she cannot have him. Barnabas attempts to adjust to the 1970s by entering a hippie commune that Victoria is familiar with, but he ends up killing them all. Later, he proposes hosting a ball at Collinwood to restore the family name. During the ball, he catches Roger stealing money from the guests and neglecting his son. That night, Barnabas shares an intimate moment with Victoria, who confides in him the truth about herself. She was originally a child named Maggie Evans, and she was constantly visited by the ghost of Josette Dupré. This convinced her parents that she was insane, leading them to place her in a mental asylum. She eventually escaped, took on a new identity as Victoria Winters, and made her way to Collinsport. She feels inexplicably drawn to Barnabas, as though she has known him forever. The two kiss, unaware that an enraged Angelique is watching. The day after the ball, Barnabas discovers that Dr. Hoffman has been using his blood to make herself immortal. Enraged by her betrayal, he kills her and dumps her body into the ocean. Finally, he catches Roger searching for the vault and presents him with an ultimatum: either be a good, attentive father to David, or leave with enough money to sustain him. Roger chooses to leave Collinwood, abandoning David, much to his son's grief. When a ceiling ornament falls and nearly crushes David, Barnabas saves him, but, in doing so, exposes his true nature to everyone, including David and Victoria, who withdraw from him in fear. Barnabas meets Angelique and begs her to lift his curse. She instead offers him a choice: join her so they can rule Collinsport together, or she will lock him back in the box and destroy everything he loves. He refuses her, so she makes good on her threat. She locks him in the box again and hides it in an abandoned mausoleum, planning to keep him there until all he loves is destroyed. She then blows up the Collins family factory and blames the Collins family for the disaster, stirring up an angry mob to attack Collinwood. David, guided by his mother's ghost, finds Barnabas and frees him. They return to Collinwood just as the mob arrives. Barnabas offers to surrender himself in exchange for his family's safety, but then attacks Angelique, cracking her skin. This unnatural sight exposes her as a witch, and the townspeople quickly abandon her. The Collins family then joins forces to defeat Angelique: Barnabas with his vampire strength, Willie with an axe, Elizabeth with a shotgun, and Carolyn, who is revealed to be a werewolf, having been cursed by Angelique. Finally, David summons the spirit of his mother, whom Angelique had drowned, and she hurls Angelique into a chandelier. Mortally wounded, Angelique rips out her heart and offers it to Barnabas, confessing that she truly did love him. In the aftermath, Barnabas searches for Victoria, only to hear from David that she is heading toward Widow's Hill. He rushes to stop her, but learns that she intends to jump off the cliff unless Barnabas makes her a vampire so that they can be united forever. She would rather die than live apart from him. She jumps, and Barnabas saves her by biting her, turning her into a vampire. This act merges Josette's spirit with Victoria, who awakens as a vampire, now fully embodying Josette. Barnabas ends the film with another voiceover narration, stating that despite Victoria being dead, Josette is now alive in her body, and they live happily ever after in the dark shadows. His eternal suffering and guilt of immortality have seemingly come to an end. In the final shot, at the bottom of the ocean, the body of the newborn vampire Dr. Hoffman reanimates. Thank you for watching, and watch the other movie.